This is the hardest raid in the game, Hard Mode Theater of Blood. And today we're going to be running in a 5 scale, which is what I typically do. 5 scales are the fastest and the most fun. What's different from all the hundreds of other raids I typically do here though, is today I'm on the range roll. I have done these a handful of times, but it's definitely not a main role for me. I'm typically one of the freezers, and I'd say my second most common role is to be on melee DPS. This is mostly just because as the range roll, you need to bring like 20 or so black chins, and as an Iron Man, that's just a lot of chins per raid. I don't necessarily mind hunting them, but nevertheless, I digress. So we are doing the typical, I would say slightly advanced. You know, if you're slightly experienced with hard mode top, you should be doing these things by now, and that's pushing 70s crabs, ignoring them until you proc the 50s, and then you stack with the team. As the range roll stacking, all I have to do is just take care of the south 1 crab, like with 1 or 2 scythe swings, and then I chin the clump that the freezers will be freezing at. You see those 4 marked tiles in a square, that's where the crabs are going to be at. You can see here on the 30s. In fact, we're moving so fast I can't explain this quick enough, but basically all I had to do was post 70s crabs. I ZCB'd to get to 50s faster so that, you know, the 70s crabs don't leak into Maiden before 50s crab even spawn and get frozen. And then obviously proc 30 crabs after chinning the clump and go for the skip. So that was a 129 and that was rather slow. I'm asking the team right now, it's like, hey, you know, what went wrong, right? So I asked one of the melee DPSs if they spec'd to push the 70s to 50s because it was rather slow. I did my part in ZCBing, but we were definitely missing some damage there. Not a big deal though, a 129 is on the slow side, but you know, nobody died, we got through it. And one slower room is not going to end the raid or anything like that. Especially if we're talking about in the context of simply just trying to make time so that you're eligible for kits and dust. Yeah, that time is absolutely free. I believe it's like a 25-minute window. We are nowhere near that, even when we die a bunch of times, even if we died 10 times. So here we are in Bloat, nothing too special here. The only thing is that, obviously in hard mode, the feet are constantly falling. %49 after the first down, which is not great, but not terrible, I suppose. I will be Dragon Claw speccing as soon as it goes down. And we should be able to get the 2 down here. Just making sure I, you know, don't step into any feet or anything like that. Tank the stomp here. 0.1%. Okay, you know, right here I'm just pinging the team. It's like, come on guys, 2 down, you know? It's not that big of a deal, you know, obviously people want to play their lives and whatnot, but if you run any hard mode tops, you will know it's like a running thing. It's like 2 down or bust, you know? If it's not a 2 down, what are we doing? We might as well wipe and reset. It's kind of a joke, but yeah, like it's not something to take too seriously. Anyways, we're moving on to Nylo, and this is the part where it's very, very fun on the range roll. So here I actually open up with the T-bow. 1 ranged Nylo is going to spawn from each lane, and because there's nothing too crazy going on, I can go ahead and hit them earlier with the T-bow. Now transition into the blowpipe, and I'm pretty much going to be blowpiping constantly, non-stop. Well, again, like it's a bit slow in the beginning here in the Nylo waves. It's nice and chill, but it'll ramp up. And I just noticed my twisted bow is actually on accurate from pre-firing in Maiden, so I switch it to rapid now because I will be using the T-bow a fair bit as well. And obviously I have chins, in fact I have them now, the Nylo wave 10 boss spawns, but as the range roll I'm responsible for chinning these double greens from every single lane. So I kind of just ignore the first Nylo boss, and then I clean up the room, And then, actually, I'm just now noticing I have a Sang staff, a Sanguinesti staff in my inventory here. And this is because just moments before we started this raid, I was like, you know what, guys, I'm gonna RDPS today. I'm gonna range roll, as people were asking what roles to do. And then I took a look at my range setup, and it was incredibly outdated. I'm talking about no oath plate, no Avernic treads, obviously no Ayak. So none of the Doom Mocha stuff, none of the Yama stuff, and I had to adjust the setup very quickly. So the second demi-boss we do take care of, we help the team with that. But we're so strong, I don't even get the Chally off, so I get to save my spec there, I suppose. So right here, minor mistake by me. I wasn't ready for the 21 greens right there, but I mean, not the end of the world, I should say. But that was a moment where I was able to chin, but I just wasn't ready for it. But yeah, the entire time, I'd say, like, probably like 95% of the time, 99% of the time, I am just blowpiping, blowpiping, blowpiping. 27 south right there. I knew that was an aggro. That was going to flick to green and be an aggro, but I just got ahead of myself there, and I actually hit it at the wrong time while it was still flicking, so I had to have one of the teammates clean it up for me. So the Nylo boss on wave 30. I mentioned this in other hard mode top videos, but most teams will typically just protect against that Nylo boss and then finish up the waves. A more experienced team can choose to just start focusing it down, chip away at it, because the room is just going to be a lot cleaner, right? Like, the pillars aren't on the brink of falling down. People should be relatively healthy. So we got a 255 cleanup right there, which I think is actually pretty good. Pretty good. So I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with my range performance. There was a lot of green left over towards the end of that Nylo room too. I guess a lot of splits. The splits are RNG. Sometimes they'll, you know, split to mage or melee. In this case, it was a lot of range Nylos. Now, as the range roll, by default, you get to be the anchor against the Nylo King? Nylo Queen? The boss. The Nylo boss. So you just get to focus on switching your prayers and switching your weapons without worrying about moving. Just a quick explainer. When it's range roll, everybody has to be 2 tiles apart. When it's mage, everybody has to be stacked on top of each other, and when it's melee, it doesn't matter. So not only do you have to hit your correct prayers and make sure you're attacking with the correct style, but you do have to position yourself well, otherwise you run the risk of wiping the team. It can be very, very dangerous. I'm taking my sip of my coffee here, but I realized I didn't really take the time to explain the spellbook I'm on and whatnot. Obviously on the freeze roll, you're going to be on Ancients, but here on the range roll, I'm on the Lunar Spellbook. I'm running Vengeance, and I can cast Vengeance on other people. People can't cast Vengeance on me because Iron Man things. And I have pot share. So just at the start of the Nyla room, I actually pot shared my range pot. So not only was I range potted, which is obviously needed as a range roll, but other people were as well in case they needed to range anything. And I'm actually not sure if I did this, but there is one other Iron Man in the room, so really I just used 3 doses when I pot shared, and I had 1 more dose just before the boss, in which I could pot share again. Again, I'm not really sure if I did that or not, but I don't see a range pot in my inventory right now, so can only assume I did that. But yeah, so I'm on Lunar Spellbook for Vengeance and pot share. And I also have Spellbook Swap, so I can use Thralls. Sotetseg, I mean, not much to explain here. The ball comes out during P2, we DD, but turns out we don't even have to tank it. We didn't take any damage. As the range roll, I am 3rd in the orb order, so it's fairly simple. Anytime I get the maze, I'm not the first and I'm not the last. Like, I definitely will never be the last. So I don't have to worry about the specific timing. I just know that when it's my turn to run the maze, you know, I just got to go ahead and do it. I don't have to worry about proccing the NATOs or anything like that. So the range roll is kind of comfy in those ways. But I will go back about talking about the Nyla room, and a good range roll really makes or breaks that room. Obviously, if you're a freezer or a melee DPS roll and you're just complete dead weight, you're going to negatively affect that room as well. But the range roll is very, very pivotal in my opinion. We get a 155 Sot there. Not too bad, not too bad. So our Maiden bloat times weren't great. Our Nylo time honestly wasn't either, but the Sotetseg, anytime I see a below 2 minute, I'll consider that good, to be honest. So as the range roll, I actually have more inventory space for supplies, and definitely more points. Range roll tends to have a lot of points because of all the chinning during Maiden and Nylo room. So I had a ton of points to work with, and I even greeted and held on to my black chins. I had 7 left over. Typically, you would want to, you know, either figure out exactly how many chins you're going to need and only bring that amount, or you drop your chins and then you fill your inventory up with other things, right? But, you know, Iron Man things, I was just greeting out. Plus, I have 3 brews and 2 restores in my inventory, which I am very, very comfortable with. Typically, on the freeze roll, I'd have 1 less brew than this current setup. So, yeah, I'm very comfortable with the setup I have, the supplies I have. And I think this should be more than okay heading into Verzik. Not much to say here. Xarpus, you know, this is just the exhumed phase, so we're just making sure we step on as many of these exhumes as we can, and then get ready for the start of the boss. We do have the spellbook swap here, which I preemptively did, so we can summon our Thrall. I am going to be mauling here. My typical start at Xarpus is, well, first things first, I don't have an Elder Maul. I typically bring a BGS, so I would be Scythe BGSing. But in this instance, I guess I will be mauling and then, you know, starting the cycle. I still do have a ZCB in this setup. In fact, I have a buckler to pair with it, although it's not that important. It's mostly for the chins. So I'll be 5-tick Xarpusing. You know, I've said that a few times in previous videos, Xarpusing. But I'll be 5-tick Scything Xarpus here. And then, as soon as I have the Surge Pot available, which is currently on a 25-second cooldown, it'll usually come up during the Enrage phase. I will sip that Surge Potion, and then in the middle of the Enrage phase, I will let out a ZCB spec for a free 110 damage. Hard mode Xarpus Enrage phase being very, very easy. You know, you just click on the boss, and as long as everybody's off-ticked, or each corner is off-ticked, then, you know, you can just hands off the keyboard, hands off the mouse. Heading into the Verzik room with the total raid time of 11:41, this means we have a pretty good chance of doing a sub 16. Now, pre-Yama, pre-Dumamoka, a sub 16 was honestly pretty good. I would say even these days with the gear upgrades, a sub 16 is still probably above average. It's probably still considered a pretty speedy raid. But, you know, context matters, I suppose. But this is still pacing very well, I would say. So for this P1 of Verzik, we're actually doing the 112 method. I believe there's another name for this, but I think the most obvious naming is 112, and that's basically because the two majors are only going to spec once. The South Freeze is going to spec once, drop the staff. The North Freeze picks it up, specs once, drops the staff. And me, as a range roll, I pick it up, I spec once as I'm running back towards the pillar, then I spec the second time running towards Verzik. And then the melee spec twice as well, just as I did. Now, you'll see in that part there, I did tank a hit, and I think it's because the timing was a little off there, like maybe someone was late, or maybe I was late, I didn't really quite see that. But, you know, in order to not mess up the cycle, it's no big deal to just tank a hit, you know. Just make sure you're sitting healthy, pray mage is on, obviously. And, I mean, there's just no way you're going to die. And like I said earlier, I'm really comfortable with my supplies. I had a whole extra brew than usual, so I could definitely afford to do that. So right at the start of Verzik P2 here, I actually poisoned myself because I stepped directly back into one of the acid tiles. Now, the luxury of being on the Lunar Spellbook, I'll have this as the RDPS and the melee rolls. Just because of the runes I bring, I actually have Cure Me and even Cure Other. So if I do mess up and step into acid, I can just get rid of it real quick without having to use a Sandfew or anything like that, which, honestly, aside from when I first started learning hard mode Tom, I never bring Sandfews. As an Iron Man, obviously I'm just being stingy, but also it's honestly not necessary. And in some weird way, being poisoned sometimes has saved me in the past, because I would utilize the poison to proc redemption safely, and then I get more health, and then I survive a little bit longer. Like, it seems backwards, but I have used it to my advantage before. Here on P2, we've actually done very good damage. This is just, you know, all the power creep shining through. We managed to get it down to 6% without even really using any special tech, any special strategy. That was just straight scythe max gear power right there. We still did the traditional 2 down though, typically. I think when you're 5 scythe, you're always gonna proc and finish off crabs or red crabs during Verzik P2 within like 2 red crab spawns. Any more than that, and there's probably some issues going on there with your team, I don't know. But here we go, P3. We're doing nice damage here as well. And we're going to enter webs. 34% heading into webs. Pretty good, pretty good. We're definitely going to proc NATOs. Probably right here, actually. DPS is pretty good right now, and going back around, we should be pog-wepping here. Pog-wepping basically is just... this specific movement keeps Verzik in place so that the whole team doesn't miss any hits. And while we are all still dodging the purple NATOs, in this last corner here, you want to claw scratch or even claw spec if you have to spec. I just noticed I actually had 50% spec there, so I could have clawed. But it's most important to have a 4-tick weapon, or anything that's not a 5-tick weapon, right? I mean, I don't suppose you would want to use a swift blade though. But basically right there, you want to give yourself an extra tick so that you can get 1 more scythe swing before the phase ends. And right there, that was actually pretty crucial. We managed to get ourselves a 1544.